Something happened at 2 a.m. yesterday that just shattered every rule we thought governed international relations. I'm going to tell you exactly what it means and why you should be terrified. I was at my desk in Chicago when the alert came through. U.S. forces had just bombed Venezuela, not sanctioned them, not blockaded them, bombed them. And within 3 hours, they'd dragged President Nicolas Maduro from his bedroom and flown him to New York in handcuffs. 12 years of Maduro's rule, gone in one night. But here's what nobody's saying yet, and this is where my 50 years studying great power competition becomes absolutely essential. This wasn't about drugs. This wasn't about democracy. This was about testing a new doctrine that changes everything we know about American foreign policy. And the world's reaction tells you exactly why every government on earth just realized they're more vulnerable than they ever imagined. Let me take you inside what actually happened, because the official story and the strategic reality are two completely different things. The operation was called Absolute Resolve. Over 150 aircraft launched from bases across the Western Hemisphere. Delta Force operators, the most elite soldiers America has, flew in at low altitude, came under heavy fire, spent hours on the ground in Maduro's compound, and extracted him and his wife while Venezuelan forces were still trying to figure out what hit them. Trump posted a photo of Maduro blindfolded on a U.S. warship. He posted a video of the strike set to Fortunate Son, an anti-war anthem, and then he said something that made every foreign ministry on the planet go silent. We're going to run Venezuela until there's a proper transition, not support a transition, not facilitate a transition, run the country. I've studied American interventions since Vietnam. I analyzed the Gulf Wars, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. I've never seen anything like this level of brazenness, because here's what Trump just proved to every government watching. If you control resources America wants, and if you're weak enough to be vulnerable, your sovereignty is a polite fiction we maintain until we decide otherwise. The official justification? Drug trafficking. Maduro faces charges of narco-terrorism, running cocaine through Venezuela in partnership with cartels. The Trump administration designated Venezuela's Cartel of the Suns, essentially military and political officials profiting from drug trade, as a terrorist organization, with Maduro as its leader. But I want you to notice something crucial about the timing, something that reveals the real strategic calculation. Just weeks before this operation, Trump freed former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who'd been convicted in U.S. courts of smuggling over 400 tons of cocaine. 400 tons. Maduro hasn't been convicted of anything yet. He's been indicted since 2020, but no trial, no verdict. So we freed a convicted drug trafficker while bombing another country to capture an alleged one? That's not law enforcement. That's regime change with a legal veneer. And here's where it gets really interesting, the part that tells you what this is actually about. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Russia, larger than anyone. And for years, those reserves have been locked away by sanctions, by Maduro's mismanagement, by Chinese and Russian influence in Caracas. Trump said during the press conference, and I'm quoting directly here, that U.S. companies would be very strongly involved in Venezuelan oil. Not might be, not could be, would be. Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader who won the Nobel Peace Prize, had promised American investors in Miami just months ago that she'd open Venezuela's oil reserves if she came to power. Trump listened, and then apparently decided waiting for democratic processes was taking too long. Now, let me tell you why this operation represents something far more dangerous than just one intervention. For 75 years, the international order has rested on a foundational principle. Sovereign states don't invade other sovereign states to capture their leaders and install preferred governments. We violated that principle before. Panama in 1989 comes to mind when we grabbed Noriega. But we've never done it this brazenly, this publicly, with this little pretense of legal justification. The UN Charter explicitly forbids the use of force against a state's territorial integrity, except in cases of self-defense or Security Council authorization. We had neither. Venezuela didn't attack us. The Security Council didn't approve this. We just did it. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called it a dangerous precedent. Brazil's President Lula said it crossed an unacceptable line. China, Russia, Mexico, Colombia, Iran, every country that might someday find itself on the wrong side of American interests, condemned it as a violation of international law. But here's what I found most revealing. Our European allies, Britain, France, Germany, even the EU, they didn't support us. They didn't condemn us either. They issued carefully worded statements about respecting international law while monitoring the situation. That's diplomatic code for, we can't publicly back what you just did, but we're not going to fight you over Venezuela. Do you understand what that tells you? It tells you that American power has reached a point where even our closest allies recognize that opposing us carries risks they're not willing to take. The international law they keep mentioning, it only matters if someone's willing to enforce it, and nobody is. This is what hegemonic power looks like when it stops pretending to be constrained by rules. Now let me connect this to something I've been warning about for years, something most analysts still don't grasp. We're not in a unipolar world anymore. China's economy rivals ours. Russia has demonstrated it will fight for its sphere of influence. Regional powers like Turkey, Iran, India are acting independently in ways that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. In a multipolar world, the hegemon doesn't have the luxury of patience. You can't slowly build coalitions and wait for diplomatic processes when your competitors are actively working to undermine your position. You have to move decisively when opportunities appear. Venezuela was an opportunity. Maduro's regime was internationally isolated, economically collapsed, militarily weak. The opposition wanted American intervention. The oil was there. The legal pretext, however thin, existed. The military capability was overwhelming, so Trump took it. But here's the part that should worry you, the part nobody's talking about yet. What happens next? Trump says we'll run Venezuela. Okay, how? Who's actually governing? Who's managing the oil industry? Who's controlling the military? Who's preventing the country from descending into chaos or civil war? We couldn't successfully rebuild Iraq after 20 years and trillions of dollars. We couldn't stabilize Afghanistan after 2 decades. We couldn't create functioning governments in Libya or Syria. And those were countries where we at least pretended to be building local capacity. Venezuela has 28 million people, a collapsed economy, armed militias, entrenched corruption, and oil infrastructure that needs billions in investment to become productive again. And Trump's plan for managing all that is, what exactly? Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, a transition team. I've studied enough imperial overreach to know where this goes. We'll install someone we think we can work with. They'll either be too weak to control the country or too independent to follow our directions. We'll pour resources into propping them up. Local resentment will build, and eventually we'll either commit more deeply, which means potentially thousands of troops for years, or we'll pull out and leave behind another failed state. The oil might flow. American companies might profit. But at what cost? Here's what really keeps me up at night. The precedent. If we can bomb Venezuela and capture its president because we don't like his drug policies and want his oil, what's stopping us from doing the same to any other country that has resources we want and governments we don't like? Iran has oil. Should we bomb Tehran? Bolivia has lithium for batteries. Should we invade La Paz? The Democratic Republic of Congo has cobalt for electric vehicles. Should we occupy Kinshasa? The answer Trump just gave to the world is yes, if we decide it serves American interests and you can't stop us. That's not a foreign policy. That's a protection racket. And protection rackets work until they don't, until enough countries decide the risks of compliance exceed the risks of resistance. China is watching this. Russia is watching. Every mid-sized power that thought sovereignty meant something is recalculating what American friendship is worth. Because if we'll bomb our way into Venezuela for oil, what makes any country think we won't do the same to them if circumstances change? The international order isn't being challenged anymore. It's being dismantled by us, openly. And I'm not sure we've thought through what comes next. There's a reason great powers traditionally maintained at least the fiction of respecting sovereignty, even when they violated it. The fiction created stability. It allowed smaller states to trust that following the rules provided some protection. It prevented every geopolitical competition from becoming an existential threat. We just burned that fiction to the ground. And now every country has to ask itself, are we valuable enough to be protected or vulnerable enough to be targeted? I predicted this pattern years ago, the way rising multipolarity forces declining hegemons to become more aggressive, not less. But I didn't expect it to happen this fast or this obviously. The question now isn't whether this operation succeeds or fails in Venezuela. The question is what it unleashes globally. Will this deter other countries from challenging American interests, maybe in the short term? Fear works until it breeds resentment, resistance, and eventually alliance against the threatening power. Will this secure American access to Venezuelan oil? Possibly, if we're willing to pay the price of long-term occupation or propping up whoever we install. Will this restore stability to Venezuela? I have no idea. Neither does Trump, neither does anyone, because we have no plan beyond we're running it now. What I do know is this. Great powers that stop following rules don't magically become more secure. They trigger balancing behavior. Other states start working together to constrain the threat. Institutions designed for cooperation become venues for opposition. We've just given China, Russia, and every regional power that resents American dominance a perfect example of why the world needs alternatives to American leadership. I'm watching what happened in Caracas yesterday, and I'm seeing the pattern I've studied my entire career playing out in real time. The pattern where hegemons overreach, competitors mobilize, and the international system fragments. Trump thinks he just solved the Venezuela problem. What he actually did was broadcast to the world that American power no longer operates within constraints, legal, diplomatic, or moral, and the world is listening. Every embassy is sending cables. Every military is updating threat assessments. Every foreign ministry is recalculating what alignment with America actually means. Because if you're a small country watching this, you just learned that sovereignty is conditional, alliances are transactional, and international law is whatever Washington says it is on any given day. That's not the foundation for a stable international order. That's the recipe for chaos. and chaos is exactly what we're going to get. The 12-year Maduro era ended in 3 hours yesterday morning, but what began in those same 3 hours might take decades to fully understand. We didn't just capture a dictator, we shattered the pretense that international order is based on rules rather than power. And once that pretense is gone, it doesn't come back. Watch what happens next, not just in Venezuela, in every capital where leaders are now asking themselves whether they're next. That's where the real story is unfolding. The operation in Caracas, that was just the beginning.